Today on Locked On Canadiens, what is it going to take to fix the Canadiens' power play? We're going to look ahead to tonight's game against the Winnipeg Jets, and we're going to talk about a very bizarre coach ranking. All of that is coming up on today's Locked On Canadiens.
For Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 695. My name is Laura Sav, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm one of your hosts. And I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla. And we both thank you all for making us your first listen of the day every day, whether it's on YouTube or any of your favorite podcast apps. We are so grateful to you. Scott, I'm going to ask you how you're doing, and I'm going to ask you not to contextualize it in terms of tonight's game.
Well, I'm doing all right. I'm a little sleepy. I'm a little tired, and that might have to do with the COVID booster I got this morning more than anything else, or that I've been folding laundry all afternoon. But overall, I'm doing all right. The Canadiens definitely played a game. That is about what I can say about their game against the Toronto Maple Leafs on Wednesday night.
So we are going to talk a little bit about that game. We're going to talk about the few, highlights. We're going to talk a little bit about the abysmal power play, and then we're going to move on to the Winnipeg Jets game. And finally, at the end of this episode, we're going to talk about a very bizarre coach ranking. All that's coming up. But first, Scott, in tonight's game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, it always sucks to lose to Toronto, even if it is a preseason game. Let's just hope that in the regular season, the Canadiens bring back their ability to cause Toronto to have an inexplicable meltdown and lose games. In the meantime, was there anyone that really stood out to you in tonight's game, or anything that stood out to you in a positive way?
So my thought on tonight is that I don't think the Canadiens played badly. I don't think they played well, but they, possessed the puck a little bit more than Toronto. And they were playing with like a very, mostly AHL lineup. And so was Toronto. And the biggest thing is Toronto got to the dangerous areas to create their goals, and Montreal didn't, or their shots were blocked because Toronto insulated a little bit more. I have two names that stood out for me, and maybe a third in your mileage may vary. Filip Mesar and Jordan Harris, I thought, were outstanding in this game. I noticed them creating a lot of opportunities. And then the ever confusing Emil Heineman is also someone that a lot of people on Twitter pointed out, and maybe I was being too harsh not mentioning him originally. But when I first noticed Heineman in the first period, I'm like, his skating's wonky. He's not creating much. And then by the third period, he's, a little bit more elusive and everything. I wonder if he's just a slow starter, but the young guys played reasonably well. And across the board, like, I'm not going to be, too fed up with it. It's like the penalty kill didn't play well, but it was a lot of AHL guys, and the power play stinks. But Filip Mesar standing out the way he has through the rookie tournament, through scrimmages, through the first two preseason games now, the OHL is probably the right level for him going forward to. I think this is a kid who they can stick in Laval and then can call up to the NHL this year in short bursts and still get some good results out of him. I was really impressed watching him create space out of nothing tonight. And that's a skill that's really hard to teach someone. So I was really, really impressed with what I saw from him tonight.
I've got to say, I've been enjoying him so far. That's definitely been a highlight for me as well. I also kind of want to talk about the power play. It's just been a joke for a long time, a running joke for a long time. And I think the Canadiens, I don't think it's a personnel problem. I think it's a strategy problem, because we've gone through many iterations of this team, and we've seen a lot of troubling power plays. I wonder what your thoughts are, because I thought, for me, what I saw on the ice was the players not executing correctly. That's what I saw, right? I don't even think you can necessarily describe it as completely passive or anything like that, or too jittery or anything. I just felt like they were just making the wrong decisions. Like, how do you fix that?
That's the thing. Like, I look at what they did tonight, and it's just everything feels disjointed. And I know these aren't people who are going to be playing on the power play together, aren't going to be in the same league together, but something just isn't clicking. And every now and then there's an individual breakthrough, but there's not a sustained pressure with the power play. It is focused on getting it and getting a shot off and not really wearing down the defense. And tonight on power play 1, Rem Pitlick was a trigger shooter, which I like Rem Pitlick for what he does bring to this team. It is not being power play 1 shooting guy there. And I still think the biggest thing with this power play is that Juraj Slafkovsky is wasted as just a net front presence, and that they need him playing off to the side or working as behind the net guy and using his physicality to open up space there on the power play. And I think they're going to get a lot more out of that. And people are going to point, it's like, he doesn't have any goals yet. He doesn't have this. They scored 1 goal in the preseason for one thing, but I think Slafkovsky looks fine for what he's doing. There are sometimes that he's trying to force things. There's sometimes that maybe he's a little too selfish. He's learning. His physicality is there at the professional level. It's just a learning curve to hit that next step. I don't know what they're going to do with the power play this year. Like, Mike Matheson is likely their top power play quarterback, and then Chris Weidman is on power play 2. You got a million guys. We know Caulfield can shoot. We know Suzuki's going to be fine. How do you work Doc in? How do you work Dvorak in? How do you work Gallagher in? How do you work Hoffman in? How do you work potentially Slafkovsky and these other guys here? There's 5 preseason games left for them to figure it out. And I don't know how many Nick Suzuki's going to play, if he plays any at all. We haven't even seen Josh Anderson yet. Like, there's a lot of decisions to be made. So I'm not going to panic over it now, but I would like to see something that resembles a coherent system before too long here, or then I'm going to start panicking a little bit about it.
Speaking of Slafkovsky, I really like what you said about using his physicality to open up the ice. I feel like the Canadiens need to give him more opportunities to do that, not just on the power play, just in general. And he's gonna be fine. Everybody's gonna be fine. Whenever the team is good or bad, the preseasons are always a bit off. So I'm not going to put too much stock into it. And obviously we know there's going to be a lot of losses this year, but I do want to see positive steps from all of these people. And speaking of positive steps from all of these players, they're going to have another chance to do that tomorrow night. And we're going to preview that game, or tonight, actually, when you're listening to this, and we're going to preview that game in just one moment. But first, I got to remind you that betonline.net is your number 1 source for football betting info this season, NHL betting info, for everything. You're going to find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information, with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including MLB, NHL, MMA, boxing, and golf. All that is at betonline.net, or you can use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the next game, which is against the Winnipeg Jets. And the Jets did seem to release a lineup, and I didn't see the coward Mark Scheifele on there.
No, the coward Mark Scheifele is not in this lineup, which means the entire franchise is just full of cowards. But like, we knew that already. Anyways, I'm looking at their lineup here, and it's somewhere between their AHL top 6 and a few NHL guys. Brad Lambert's playing. Sorry, JD. Pierre-Luc Dubois is playing. Sam Gagner, who is apparently a Winnipeg Jet now, is playing. Mason Appleton. And then on defense, it's Ville Heinola, Jonathan Kovacic, Dylan Sandberg, Kyle Capobianco, Logan Stanley, and Nate Schmidt, with Rittich and Arvid Holm in net. And I look at that and I go, all right, it's again a mixed lineup a little bit. And there's some names we haven't seen play for the Canadiens yet. We haven't seen Christian Dvorak yet. We haven't seen a guy like Alex Belzile play yet. There's still other names kicking around that haven't been sent back. And I'm imagining by the time Saturday rolls around, when they play the Senators, the Canadiens will then cut this down for their last 4 preseason games the following week there. In this game, I don't think Slafkovsky, Mesar, or Beck should play. It's obviously, that's a lot to ask of. You have guys who played Monday, played tonight. Slafkovsky was not supposed to play tonight. Jonathan Drouin is out with an illness. We haven't seen him yet in the preseason, at least in a game. And you don't want to wear down Beck, Mesar, and Slafkovsky that quickly in this. So I'm very curious what the lineup's going to look like, because I imagine Caulfield will play. I imagine Doc will play again, probably Mike Hoffman. And then from there, who else is going to be ready to play? Who's going to get the net? Are they going to give it to Jake Allen? Are they going to give it to Caden Primo? Is Joe Verbatic going to play a game? They sent both goalies on tryout contracts back to their junior team, so it is down to just contracted goalies. And I'm kind of interested, just what are they going to do? They have a lot of bodies and a lot of guys who need to play. Is this a chance for Matthias Norlander to kind of eat up some minutes here? He played well against the Moose in the AHL for a couple of games last year when he was there. Across the board, this is a game where I'm hoping they kind of get right a little bit, get their power play sorted out. Even if they have to, if it's a high scoring game, try and figure out, get that offense clicking a little bit, because it's been stagnant to say the least so far. And the Jets are there for basically opening up defensively.
So at the time that we're recording this, we only know the Jets lineup. We don't know the Canadiens lineup, but I like that you mentioned.
We do know one player who will be playing for the Canadiens tomorrow, and that's William Trudeau. Because apparently that's the only name the Renard Lavoie wanted to tweet, that he had practiced with guys who weren't playing tonight, which means he's likely playing tomorrow, but he didn't say any of the other names, just William Trudeau. So, okay, I'm not opposed to it. Apparently he's just old enough too that he can sign an AHL contract this year without needing an entry-level deal. So
we'll see. So that's going to be interesting to watch. But one name that I do hope is in the lineup is Matthias Norlander. There's so many question marks surrounding him, and I'm really upset that people are calling him a bust already. Like, we do know there's been some issues with his development and some of the decision making that's gone around, surrounding what happened to him last year. I personally think that, I didn't see enough from him yet. It's only the preseason. I want to see more from him. I want to give him the opportunity. I want the Canadiens to give him the opportunity, because I do believe that there is room for him on this team. A lot of people, like, when you're looking even on Reddit or on Twitter or on Facebook, like, we're around, we're listening to people, we're reading. A lot of people have him as the odd man out on this, this defensive prospect system. So I want to see a bit more from him against the Winnipeg Jets.
I look at this too, is that it's like, it's okay to say that maybe he's not NHL ready. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that. David St. Louis and Mitch Brown talked about it on Twitter last night, is that his decision-making and confidence isn't where it was. And part of that is injuries shook him up a little bit. He had a rough go in the NHL because Dominique Ducharme was not a good coach. We're not going to beat around that bush, and didn't use him in the proper ways there. And I think he has a reset that he has to go through. And that's hard for a young player who's, I don't want to say frustrated, but maybe not where they want to be in all of this. And I think before long, if they can kind of unlock that, hey, do what feels natural, like Martin St. Louis talked about with the media today. He's coaching the four guys off the puck, not the guy on the puck, because that's how the game is played in the future, with those four guys, not the one carrying it at this moment. I think that's really important for someone like Matthias Norlander, whose game is about aggressive offensive play from the blue line. And that's something the Canadiens need. Yes, Chris Weidman does it. Yes, occasionally you see it from Jordan Harris and Justin Barron. But Norlander, when he's at his peak, is definitely skating in from the point or carrying the puck out of his own zone and making high-risk, high-reward plays. And they're not always going to work, but you want to encourage him to continue to try things that no one else is. And I'm hoping this is a game where they give him an opportunity. Let him quarterback power play one if Matheson isn't playing, but I assume Matheson will be playing. Let him quarterback one of the power plays. Let him operate to his strength, working as a distributor, not a secondary piece. I'm not really ready to write him off yet. He's still young. And it's okay that he's not NHL ready yet. It takes a little bit of time sometimes for guys to fully, get that. And the last thing you want to do is give up on a player of his caliber and he gets into a system where he's allowed to kind of grow and flourish. And then we do that, well, where was this in Montreal kind of thing here. So I think this game against the Jets, it's not a make or break. I'm not calling any of these games in a preseason a make or break thing, not by a long shot. But I think this is a huge opportunity for him to kind of get himself back on track. And we know how Habs fans are, and we're the same way, is that one night you're a bust, one night you're the best player in the organization. It can change in a heartbeat. And I think this is one of those chances for him.
And before we move on to our next segment, I just want to remind everybody that tomorrow's our mailbag episode. Yes, we will recap the Winnipeg Jets game, but we want your mailbag questions. If you'd like to send them to us, you can leave them in the YouTube comments. You can email them to us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, and you can tweet them to us at LO_Canadians. You can also DM us on Twitter. I promise I won't forget. Sometimes I forget those ones and then we do them a week later, but I promise I'll be on top of it this time. And in the meantime, we're going to turn our attention to a very bizarre coaching poll. And this is one of the things that I miss doing on Locked On Canadians. We used to have silly season a lot more on this podcast. We've gotten a lot more serious. And as we've grown as a podcast, we haven't had time to have a little fun. So we're going to do that. And that's coming up in our very next segment. All right. So before we move into this poll, I want to bring back fashion, Locked On Fashion, Habs fashion. And I need to say that Arbor Jackeye has insane fashion sense. I love it. He is so good at wearing what makes him look good. And Scott, do you not agree with me on this?
I do. His outfit tonight in Toronto made him look like the Undertaker from professional wrestling, though, and I'm a big fan of that. Like,
are you looking up his outfits for me? Is that what's going on now?
I mean, that's because I saw a tweet. I'm like, okay, that man can rock a mean hat, and I'm a big fan of that. So, I am all in favor of us continuing the fashion trend here, and like just absolutely doing this after every single game, or when we see something that's really good. I'm gonna jump right into this coaches poll here thing, because it's going to take less than 5 people on this list for me to immediately be mad at it. And Adam Vinyan tweeted this out. It was run through some kind of app that uses the golden ratio balance or some other
a beauty app. Like it's like an "Are you hot or not" type app.
I guess so. Like, I don't really get how it ranked these things, because number one, Jay Woodcroft of the Edmonton Oilers, which, okay, fine. Number two is Daryl Sutter of the Calgary Flames. And number three is Derek Lalonde, then John Hines, Paul Maurice, Rick Bowness, Craig Berube, Dallas Eakins, John Tortorella, Rod Brindamore, Dean Evison, Brad Larson, Sheldon Keefe, Dave Hackstall, Jared Bednar is 15th on this list, Bruce Boudreau, Lindy Ruff, Luke Richardson, Don Granato, Martin St. Louis is tied for 20th with Pete DeBoer. And I want to stop this right there, because if you put Pete DeBoer and Martin St. Louis next to each other, Pete DeBoer is the human embodiment of Kirk Van Houten from The Simpsons. Mr. I sleep in a race car bed and work at the Cracker Factory, Pete DeBoer. He looks like a divorced dad just trying his best every single time I see him. His shirts and suits don't fit quite right. He looks like he's just had way too much. And then you have Martin St. Louis, who has the quads of Adonis and is the silver fox hair and everything. And an
adorable face.
Yes.
Yes.
Like this app is like at the bottom, Peter Laviolette, fine. Andre Torini. David Quinn is 29th on this. And David Quinn might be a terrible coach, but that is a handsome man. And what? Like, I don't get it at all. Like, Daryl Sutter at number 2 might be the most offensive thing on this list above anything else. Honest to God, because how is Daryl Sutter, through whatever app this is, the second most handsome coach in the NHL? I demand an inquiry.
I'm trying to figure out who came up with the idea of running all of the coaches through this thing, and did they deliberately choose ugly pictures for teams that they don't like? Is that is that possible?
I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, who? Like you
I'm looking
said,
at him right now. He looks like, sorry, I'm talking about David Quinn at this point. I'm looking at him right now. He looks like he could be a movie star. Like
he
he
looks
could
like
play.
Benedict Cumberbatch.
There you go. Like, or he could play like a lawyer in one of those law dramas, right? Like, and he has like, all of the money and all of the girlfriends and never like wants to be tied down, like that lawyer character. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't. And Peter Laviolette is not bottom of the league.
I
Like,
mean, Peter Laviolette reminds me of Alfred Molina a little bit, the guy who played Dr. Octopus in the
right.
Spider-Man movies. But like,
I like how like that's the movie go-to you have.
look, I've watched a lot of Marvel movies. All right. Bruce Boudreaux being 16th is hilarious to me. Someone told him that, and he had a quip that I do not have in front of me, unfortunately. But like, he said someone looks like a thumb, I think, in there too, like on the rankings of this, because someone showed this to coaches and got the reaction. So like, but I just look at this app and I go, if your app has Daryl Sutter as the second most handsome coach, and like Rod Brindamore and David Quinn are not even in your top 10, something is very, very wrong with your app. And there's something very, very wrong with your eyes in and of itself. Like, come on. Like, speaking of coaches, do we have 2 seconds for me to yell at Michel Therrien before the show is over?
We do.
So
We actually have quite a bit of time left on the clock, so go for it.
So he was on a podcast, I believe, with Rafael Doucet, and he talked about how he couldn't develop anybody because there was nobody in the organization to develop. And to me, I look at that and go, okay, maybe not the high tier of talent the Canadiens have today because they were coming out of a contending window, but they traded a lot of picks for guys to continue to try and make the playoffs and make a push. And at the same time, I didn't have anyone to develop sounds kind of like a load of bullcrap to me because, yeah, Jared Tenorti had limited upside, but probably should have been better than what you made him into. Nathan Beaulieu, you benched for Douglas Murray. Sven Andrighetto had a very strong rookie season, and then you just went, no. Try to put him in the AHL. He was claimed on waivers, and he was never seen again. Charles Hudon kind of got yo-yoed between things, and that continued, and that just didn't work. Michael Bournival was someone who had a strong rookie season, and then just, nope, don't want him anymore. I get that maybe the organization wasn't in the best place at the time, but as Jared Book put it, every time someone from the Canadiens organization the last decade opens their mouth, I kind of understand why the team is in the position that it's in. Michel Therrien took zero responsibility for any things he might have done wrong. In his mind, he has never done anything wrong. And at this point, I go, we wasted so much time on you as having you as the coach here that you did heavy damage to the team. And the same goes for Sylvain Lefebvre in the AHL as well. Marc Bergevin's biggest misstep that isn't a trade, isn't a signing. It is his handling of the people who dealt directly with the players. And that was abysmal and set this franchise back to the point that we are now like where we're at now. And it's bad. And you look back at it now and, I kind of look back at it and go, there were high points, but the long-term damage that they did is not something you want to see if you're a Habs fan.
I absolutely agree with you there. And I think that the good thing is that the current Canadiens seem to have recognized that those were weaknesses in the past. They seem to have put, a coach in place, and their coaching staff was kind of selected, or at least, the defensive coach, the head coach and the defensive coach were selected as people who are interested in development, who are interested in building. The way that their drafting seems to be, at least it's bold, at least they're careful with strategy. The fact that they're investing in development, I think, is the biggest key here. And, we've talked a lot about Michel Therrien and stuff like that. And I just think that old school guys in today's NHL, they've got a limited shelf life. The only old school guy that I can think of that will stick it out is probably John Tortorella, because every time you turn around and count him out, he's gonna.
People keep hiring John Tortorella for whatever reason. I don't know if it's just to like root out people they don't want in the organization anymore or what, but John Tortorella's got a shelf life of Twinkies, man. Like that you can't get rid of the guy, which props for you. Get the bag, I guess. Like, you know, get paid. You won a Stanley Cup already. Who the hell cares? That gets you basically whatever you want.
Exactly. But he's the only old school guy that I see actually, like, you know, sticking around. In the meantime, we will not be sticking around. We will be back tomorrow with our mailbag episode. So don't forget to get those questions in. You can find our podcast wherever you find your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can leave questions for the mailbag in the YouTube comments. You can also email them to us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. And you can tweet them to us or DM them to us on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. Thank you so much for listening. And when you're done checking out this episode, make sure you check out Locked On NHL. See you tomorrow.